So, friends and enemies, welcome to the Forensic Focus podcast. Owing to the vagaries of the way the sausage factory works, this is actually our first recording for 2024, and we are delighted today to have Alan Platt with us from MSAB. Desi is stupidly early in the morning, and Alan and I have definitely pulled the "we're both in the same country" card and are doing this at a reasonable time. And have had plenty of coffee. So we'll kick off. Alan, do you mind introducing yourself to us and giving us a bit about your role with MSAB as it stands? And then we'll go into your background, which I have a little pre-knowledge about and is fascinating. But we'll get into that in a sec. But tell us about your role with MSAB at the moment and introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah. Hello. So Alan Platt. I'm a professional services consultant with MSAB. Been with the company now for 2 years and work with professional services on a small team. And my job is really the managing of projects. So some big projects that we've got with customers. So managing those projects and managing some services that we've got. We've got some service contracts that we have with some larger accounts, if you like, and it's just managing those, managing the personnel, keeping the customer happy, making sure that everything runs smoothly, and making sure that the right people talk to the right people with the customers, the right people our side talking to the right people their side, and also just doing whatever I can to help out. So
fantastic. And so how did you get into this? And forensics is an odd industry, and everybody seems to come into it in a slightly different way. But for yourself, I know in advance what your background is, but do tell, how did you get into working with MSAB and why?
So I'd been a police officer. So I was a police officer in the UK. I was previous to being a police officer, I was a civilian in the Metropolitan Police. So I did about 8 years as a civilian, and then joined BTP, British Transport Police, and did about eight years with them. Moved over to the Met Police, and for the last 8 years or so with the Met Police, I was in specialist operations, and I was working on a small digital forensics unit. So I was doing phone extractions, phones all the way up to laptops, so whatever. So if you're looking at level 1, 2, 3, we were more of level 2. And I was heavily involved also with training. So as I got further into it, got more experience, got more confidence, if you like, I got involved with the training. So I'd train in XRY. So I train level 1 users. So we had like a cadre of users on using Kiosks. So I'd be training them. I was trained to train the training level from MSAB. And for the last 2 years or so of my time with specialist operations in the Met, I was involved with, I wrote a training course for XAMN, but I didn't just want to do a training course in how to learn XAMN. It was more a training course aimed at investigators, so that anyone who is involved in an investigation where they are thinking, or there's a possibility that there could be digital forensics involved, particularly mobile phones, then the importance of those of that data, what to expect from the data, so you have a lot of people that, because I was training all users, they were all different levels. You might have someone who, they're not interested in digital forensics, not interested in phones particularly. They've got an iPhone, but they know how to use an iPhone, but they've got no idea how an Android works. So training the difference between those two, understanding what can be captured from each one. So it's important for them to understand where that phone should go, maybe. So should it go to the lab, or is it suitable for the frontline side of things? Legislation. So we did some, got all the information we needed about particular legislation. So if you found media on extraction and it was maybe an offence, what type of offence was it? What do you need to do to prove that offence? So so you're not just blindly looking for the data. How to look for that material and what to do when you see it. Apps, the importance of apps, and especially chat apps and things like that. And then finally we went into XAMN. So it was all learning how to use XAMN to a good standard. Not although we were training everybody to use it, it was training everyone to a good standard. And then it'd be a 2-day course, and then the second day they would be learning how to use XAMN with, like, I'd set basically 3 phones. I'd got 3 different phones, Androids and iPhones, filled them up with data, chat data, location data. The three people were all communicating with each other, so there was links, and it was a case of find the answers to these 150 questions. You got the whole day, go through it and try and find the data. Did it in easy, medium, and hard level, so they all, they had to do the easies. They could try and do the medium and the hard and stuff like that. And I'd also trained previously. I trained something like 30 people up as Spocks in examines. They were really good levels. So we were basically did it so that myself and a colleague would do day one. So day one, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, training all these people. And day two, they'd sit in a room on their own with a Spock could be nearby. If they needed help, then they'd call them in, and it was really good. And we trained 200 people in that to examine, got them trained to a really good level. Did a similar sort of thing for refresher, but for that one, I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting. So I got basically a topic of the type of topic that we were dealing with, so a particular category of sort of interest, if you like, and filled 3 phones with data using the type of language and terminology that these people would be using. And then so rather than just saying, right, here's your refresher course, learn, examine, here's the updates, it was a case of learn, examine, but at the same time, I'm going to teach you all about the type of stuff that you'll see when you're doing your triages. And it just makes it more interesting. And so the first course that went national, so I was teaching it nationally for a trainer course. And then I did that, and then in the middle of that, I went and joined MSAB. So yeah.
So do you still do training for MSAB?
No, I don't. So I've just written a training course, funny enough. So an exec director. So I've written a training course in how to use exec director of the admin client. So just an online course. But no, I don't do training anymore. So which is I loved it. It's not maybe not something I'd want to do day in day out because it is mentally exhausting. But really rewarding, especially when you get someone come in that's looking petrified and they're thinking, I don't think I'm going to be very good at this, and they're really nervous, and then by the end of the 2 days they walk away and they're actually like, you know what, I really enjoyed that. I was heavily on it's not pass fail. It because we had to train everybody, it was a case of, look, you've got to do this, but you've got to do it to a good standard. You need to know what you're doing. So that instantly relaxes them, and then it just becomes about learning. Which is, if you're enjoying something, I find I learn it better. Sometimes you go on a course and such focus is on the exam, and you worry about. And I think it infringes learning sometimes. So this was just, look, let's get you to a really good level so you can use examine to a good level, find the data, and it worked. So it was good fun.
So going back to kind of all your training and everything, that sounds really awesome that it was practical. I think I just wanted to ask a few questions because I think you dropped some terminology there that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure some of our listeners won't be familiar with. And I'll go backwards from, I think, the most recent to the early one. So you mentioned Spock.
Sorry, yeah. I'm typical. I mean, in the police, you just live on acronyms and stuff. Yes. So Spock is it is a sort of like the main point of contact, if you like. So the singular point of contact.
Okay.
So we had Spocks. We had 30 or so Spocks, senior point of contact, so that anyone dotted around a particular location, if they had a particular problem with examine and they were like, look, I know I was trained on this a couple of months ago, but it's gone straight out of my head. They knew that they could go to one of those individuals and say, can you help me out?
Okay. And then the other one that you mentioned was you were using Kiosks. So, I come from a military background into commercial, but not policing. So, what are Kiosks? Just so people could visualize.
I don't know if you can see it, but that's a kiosk there.
Okay, yeah.
So it's very heavy, but it's a portable device, so it's more for frontline usage, and you basically got the screen at the top, which has got all the hard drive in it, and down the bottom you just you have the kit where you just plug in. If you want to you can do DVDs, CDs, USBs, and you can just do extractions, and it's just a big heavy box, so that the users can wherever it's posted, just use it from there. So it's more aimed at the level 1 users, so the frontline officers. yeah,
Right. Okay. And I guess
Yeah.
that's a nice lead into the last question that I had was the definition of what the different levels are, because you did mention level 1, 2, and 3, and that you sat at
definitely.
level 2, but I like that's the first time that I've heard that kind of
Okay.
terminology in policing.
Yes. So level one would be the frontline. So the frontline
Hmm.
officers, so they're trained to sort of, they're trained to a good standard because we would obviously train people that were level one. So they're trained to a good standard, but they're not day-to-day users. They are they have a full-time job, but they'll also do extractions. So I think you spoke to your colleague spoke to Simon Crawley a couple of years ago from my team. So he talked all about frontline policing. So it's the frontline officers. It's the ones that might be told to do a phone extraction from a victim or
Hmm.
witness, or maybe even a suspect. They're not trained to the highest level. Obviously, is the lab. They're trained to exceedingly high level. Level two is where I used to work, so it's more sort of you're one step above level one, or we could do phones, laptops, and any type of digital media device. But we want a lab. We'd also do mobile forensics, and we'd go out and visit
Hmm.
sites and do it to an evidential standard, to a very high standard. But you're not a lab, and your labs are your level three, trained
Okay.
to the very high standard, can do any type of extraction that they
Hmm.
can.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, there was just a few in there that first time I was hearing them, but yeah, all makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that regard, sort of, you've touched upon both the kiosks, which obviously are quite heavy, and then frontline extraction. So MSAB does tablets as well. You mentioned those earlier.
Yes. Yep. So kiosks and tablets. So for your frontline officers, you'll have the kiosk, the tablet, and you'll have MSAB Express. So that is essentially a laptop with the same. Everything is the same as a kiosk. So XRY is the same. So the software is the same for everything, but the kiosks, the tablets, and the Express have the general difference is they've got a workflow with it. So that's the GUI as you see as you work through. So where I worked before, then I would just go straight. If I wanted to do an extraction, I'd have my notes and I'd go straight into XRY. Whereas the Kiosk tablets and Express for level one officers, they would be following through a workflow, and that would be something that we would help the customer sit down and design. So for the likes of, say, my colleague Simon, he will sit down with the customer, like, right, what do you want? How do you want it to look? And there'll be a consultation. Okay, well, consider this, this, and this, and eventually, what the user uses is what's been designed by the customer, and working with us, and that is essentially you just work through and you've got your case data. You've got the details about whether the phone was on or off, was it in airplane mode, developer options, was that set, and everything is how the customer wants it to look. So some customers have really long detailed workflows, you just literally work along the kiosk and you go next and fill out all the details. So there's no writing. If it's a modern workflow, it's designed in a way so that you're not actually writing anything. It's a case of filling in the data, and at the end of it, we can produce some notes, or case notes, or whatever you want to call it, and that is everything that the officer's done basically. So the case details, any photos they've taken, if there's a digital signature, that would be recorded on there. And so you'll also have maybe a summary of the extraction. So it makes it so if you're doing the training, it makes it much easier to train, because obviously you can concentrate on the actual digital forensic side of it. So the complexities of Android maybe compared to iPhones. So for users that don't use it every day, you can concentrate more on that. And it also means it's much easier for the customer to comply with legislation. So ISO, if you're trying to go through ISO accreditation, then you can really you can really narrow it down and make it very, very tight, so that it helps you comply. So yeah, so that's the sort of difference between
Between them.
two.
So I mean, essentially, you work with professional services now. Is that a feature of professional services to help to develop that workflow? That's something that you're going in and offering
Yes.
to work with.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll just basically start off with the customer will contact MSAB, so they might contact sales or their account manager and say that they're interested in a workflow. They'll get pointed to us, and we'll sit down with them, and it would just be a Teams meeting, and it would be right. Okay, well, what have you got a workflow already? Maybe it's a new customer. that has never had a kiosk or tablet or express before. So we'll sit down and say, right, well, what do you want? What are you looking for out of this? And we'll go through the options for them and sort of show them the latest updates, what it can do. And then it's just a case of, over a period of time, lots of emails going back and forth, more meetings, lots of shared PDFs and stuff. And eventually, at the end of all of that, they'll end up with a lovely new workflow that they can easily load onto their kiosks, and it can be managed through exec director. So you can just push out the workflow if you have a networked environment, and it's just a case of keeping it updated, hopefully. So as new developments come out, then they can just update their existing workflow. So
now, you said if you have a networked environment,
yes.
So the kiosks themselves are not necessarily, or the devices are not necessarily standalone, isolated. I'm not going to say unprotected. That's not fair. Isolated bits of equipment. They are pluggable into networks.
Yeah, they can be both. So you can have standalone, and you might have an environment where you've got 10 or so sites where you've got standalone kiosks, and you can take the data, you can export the data out and pump it into exec directors so that you can keep all that data and you know what's going on. Or you can connect it to maybe a local environment, or you can connect it up. You can connect the two through the cloud. So or so the data is going into the cloud, I should say. So yeah, you can connect it all through your network and manage it all centrally. So we have a lot of customers that maybe have large geographical sites, and they'll have exec director sitting at one site, and then they can see from their office, they can see whether the kiosks are online or offline, whether they're working, whether there's a fault, who's using it, what and on what. So it makes it much easier if it's networked.
Now, given the nature of the potential content that's being put in, not because you're putting it in, but because it's what you're pulling off objects that are being plugged into it, how is this managed in terms of security? Because Desi and I, we're both been around the security industry long enough to know that there's no such thing as a secure computer on a network. And therefore, how are you managing this risk, or is this being given over to the organisations as their bailiwick and their problem?
No, well, it's a case of working together, really. It's a case of giving advice from other customers that we've had, and maybe offering them to speak to other people. So we've got people that are going through different stages of their progress, if you like. So we've obviously got tech experts that can give them advice in how to make it as secure as possible. But it's also you've got the XOY file, which is encrypted anyway, so that helps to it. It helps the security side of it. But it's a case of working together and so that they come away with a secure environment. And you have some customers that the data is going out. It will sit on the kiosk and they'll export it out onto an encrypted USB. So I've got one customer I'm working with, and that's how it's done. It's exported out to an encrypted USB. So there's actually no data passing through anywhere. It's literally, and then once it's sent to the USB, then it's deleted from the kiosk. And then you have others that will just export it out or upload it to a cloud, to a secure environment in the cloud, and then again it's deleted from the kiosk. So once it's exported, then it's gone. So, but yeah, it's a case of working together so that and they've got their experts on their side, and we'll work very closely with them so that they have the secure environment that they should have.
Cool. So when you've gone through and made those workflows with the customer, and it's specific to their environment and all that, does professional services, or I can't remember whether you said that you don't do training or MSAB doesn't do training, but do you
I don't do training, so we do.
Just you?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So then is there another part that works with the customer to develop training so that if they have employee turnover, then they can get trained up on their own workflow and get up to speed
Yes.
quickly. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you can have it so that if a customer, so what we do is when a customer comes in, then the training team will make sure that they've got their particular workflow. So when they go through the training, they are actually seeing it exactly as they will see it when they go back to their home environment. And we'll also the training team have a train the trainer. So
Awesome. Yeah.
they're trained to a high standard, and they'll go away. So I was trained as train the trainer, and I was trained on my workflow, and then I would then pass on that to my colleagues.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool.
So, and we've talked about, or we've touched on, let me rephrase, we've touched on loosely in the idea of the workflows, the fact that it makes it easier to comply with, certainly in the UK, some of the ISO standard stuff that's coming in, which is clearly causing a lot of pain for a lot of people in a lot of ways. Can you talk us through how, first of all, that is something that you're able to address with MSAB and the features that's going to make that work. But so secondly, we talked briefly again about validation and verification stuff, and that was something that you were saying that you're also able to assist with. So that's no longer something that's being necessarily entirely something that the force themselves have to deal with, or the provider, the user themselves actually has to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll come to that last bit later afterwards. But the first bit, so with the ISO accreditation, yeah. So we've got obviously the workflows, as I've just been saying. So you can design your workflow and make it as tight as possible, so that so the user basically is very I suppose restricted in what they're doing. So they have a tight path how they follow it through. They can't just go and maybe decide to do whatever they want. It is a case of like, here's the question, answer the question, fill in the data. Then when they get to XRY to do the extraction, you can limit it so that on exec director, when you manage it, you can have user groups. And so, for instance, if you have maybe 5 sites, you could have 5 user groups, 5 for each site. Or you could have 1, so they all fit into one user group. And then you can set it so that each user is on a user level. So, for instance, you might train a whole lot of users, and you might say, okay, well, they're trained now, they're up to a good standard. Let's put them up to, say, a level 4. So it would go from 4 down to 0, which is disqualified. And you put them as 4, and it's a case of managing the users so that you can see what they're doing, so that they're keeping their skills up, which is really important for ISO accreditation. You're not just getting people that, you're not just keeping people on the list that aren't doing extractions. You can monitor what, the type of extractions they're doing. And if you have a user that is dropping down a level, is maybe not doing the sufficient number of extractions as they should do, so you can set it maybe to say, look, you need to do 3 extractions a month. One of them has to be Android, one has to be an iPhone, one has to be a SIM. If they don't do that, then they drop down a level. And then with a recent addition we've had to exec director, you can make it so that if they drop into maybe, say, level 2, so they're 2 off being disqualified, then it can limit their actions and what they can do within XRY. So you could say, okay, so level 4, you can do logical, you can do no files, and maybe you could do target extractions. But then if someone drops down a level or 2, you can say, okay, you drop down level, you now need to do 4 or 5 extractions because we're keeping an eye on you, and you can now only do target extraction, which is one of the profiles that we've got. So with the target extraction is another really good way for ISO accreditation, because it really helps you with the data protection. So if you've got your digital processing notice, and it's basically saying you're allowed to get data for this date and time, or this week or whatever, then you can select it so that you get exactly the data that you need for that time period, and you're complying with what the rules and regs say. And yeah, so between the two, so between sort of the workflow, or between two, it's more than two, the workflow, XRY, so how you can restrict officers to doing certain type of profiles, so they're not, you might have it so that you just want your officers to do target extractions, and if a job comes in that requires more than that, then that goes to the lab, for instance. And it's a case of training the users. So yeah, so that's how we can comply or help them comply with ISO accreditation. And the verification side of things is that's a new thing that we've got. So we've got a customer with something like around now something like 200 kiosks and tablets. So a really busy estate. They're up to a stage of about 150 now connected to Azure. So, and they've got about 50 or so kiosks that are standalone. So they will do all of the validation themselves. So that is something that they do, and it's not something that we get involved with. We obviously they validate and verify their own software, their software and their hardware, etc. And then we have so one of the projects I've been working on is where we have a service contract with this customer, and we have a service engineer. Any hardware faults, then that service engineer will go out. They'll also work on site, so it's really good for the customer. They've got someone from MSAB sitting in their office, and a new thing that we're just starting this week actually, and it is where the engineer who's trained by us and is a qualified, experienced engineer. They're trained by us in XRY and XAMN. Then they would do the verification. So they'll basically be given a test phone and a spreadsheet or whatever spreadsheet or document, and it will say just fill out the. So they'll basically do an extraction. Maybe we've had an update to XRY. So say 10.9 comes out in the next update for XRY. It's already been validated and verified, and then so the customer knows the results, what it should do, and then the engineer will go out and then they'll do an extraction using their test phone, record the results, and then go around all those 50 kiosks or so, and then pass the details back to the customer, who will then confirm whether it's done. So we're not marking our own homework as such. It's nothing like that. It's just a case of helping the customer, really getting like a really good, tight, close working relationship with that customer, helping them out with what can be a really laborious process, because it's got to be done every single time there's an update to software, so to comply with your ISO accreditation.
Mm.
No, that's fantastic. Now, just as a sort of slightly contentious off-topic, or not entirely off-topic thing, but as a former policeman, as a former investigator, do you think that the ISO standard is restricting the police in what it is that they can achieve? Because they're, you were saying, for an example there, that if you've dropped down to level 2, that you'd only do targeted extractions. Do you think there's a risk of missing evidence or
no? I don't. I think it's really having been someone who was involved, not necessarily the manager, but involved with managing the users. It's really important that those users know what they're doing, that they're at a certain skill level, and if for whatever reason they're not, maybe because it's just not for them, they thought it might be but it's not, or they're just not good enough, then they shouldn't be doing extractions, or they might need extra training. So I think it's super important that you have people that are doing the extractions that want to do it, and they're good enough to do it, and they're doing good quality extractions, because that's really, if you are going to comply with legislation, and you've got to be to a good enough standard. ISO, no, well, it's here, isn't it? I mean, you have to, you've got no choice. If you are running a digital forensics department, then you have no choice. You've got to comply with ISO accreditation. Yeah, it's expensive, and it's I'm sure it's a real mission to get through, and it's one of our customers is soon to be going through it for their Frontline. I think might be maybe the first to do it. So yeah, and I think it's for the benefit of the person who's having their phone extracted. I know if I was maybe a suspect or a victim of crime, then I'd want to know that there were strict rules, that that the law enforcement have to comply with those rules and procedures. So no, it's something you just have to do. It's part of change, isn't it? And I think it's a change for good, but I'm sure it's hard work and very expensive.
Yes, I think it's hard work and very expensive. It's a good summary for somebody who's got over 200 kiosks and as many staff as some of those clients you have, it will be an entertaining experience for them, I'm sure. Okay, so I mean, in terms of MSAB, what can we expect coming up? What's in the pipeline for professional services? What are you sort of looking at offering, and what's in the pipeline for the products that you've got coming out soon?
Okay, well, we've got a new CEO, so obviously with that comes we've got a big strategic overview, and there's some investment coming in. So it's probably at the early stages of that. So there's obviously they're looking at everything. So it's interesting times, exciting times, whatever for that. So lots going on. Continued development with all the products. I mean, I'm a big fan of XAMN, so I've obviously used it loads. That now I think is just the best it's ever been. So exec director, I'll probably plug my training here actually. So that's something that we've not had before. So if you're a user of exec director, then to have that, so to sit there for 3-4 hours, learn all about exec director. So that's pretty good. Yeah, we just had some big updates in exec director as well, so making it faster and more efficient in how it uploads the data. So obviously if you've got something like 200 kiosks that are connected to a network, then you want that upload to be fast and work as efficiently as possible. So we've made some big changes in that. I've been working really hard on the development guys and working really hard on the database. So for exec director, so obviously if you're getting all that data from all these phones, you want to know what they're being used for. It's really important for the manager of any digital forensics unit. Okay, you're spending all this money on these kiosk tablets, whatever, lab, whatever. You can connect XOY Office to a lab. You connect XAMN Pro to exec as you can to XAMN Pro. So you can connect everything to exec, and all that data is available to so you can see who's using your kiosk tablets, examine what data's coming out, where's busy, what particular times are busy, what type of phones they're doing. So all of that data is available in your database, and we just made it much easier to get that data out. So that's pretty good, and it's taken a lot of work, I know, for those guys. So just lots of really good general improvements, but I'm sure there'll be more coming out, but maybe some stuff that I can't say right now. But yeah, looking at the whole lot.
So I'm just wrapping my head around the process as well. So you've got the kiosks and tablets out in the field that is doing the acquisitions and pushing it all to that central server or cloud storage. And then can that be pushed into when you're talking about lab, does that have to be like a similar bunch of kiosks, or can it just be pushed into whatever that lab has in terms of to do digital forensics and parse that data?
Yeah, so you can connect if you have an environment where you've got particular MSAB kit. So you might have, for instance, I don't know, 50 kiosks out and about for the frontline officers, but you've also maybe got a central lab, which is probably quite common. I mean, for you always have a lab, and there'll be some that don't have frontline, but there'll be many that do. So they will have their kiosks and tablets dotted about their estate, and they will have the lab as well. You can connect, if you have XRY Office, then you can connect all of that to Exec Director. So you can pump out or push out your software updates to the lab offices and the lab equipment. So, but their lab equipment is obviously they're using it. They're separate. They're doing their own thing.
Okay.
And Exec Director managing probably more so for the frontline officers, just keeping good tabs on everything, keeping it running, making sure it's all running smoothly.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So was there because we've talked about Exec Director and a few of the upcoming features, but is there anything else in Exec Director that really helps organizations manage their frontline, or just the management of the data flow as well, that you wanted to that we haven't discussed that you wanted to highlight?
So I mean, new software comes out, you can push out the updates so you can do it so that you can time it so that all the updates go out at a particular time, so that when the kiosks aren't being used, you can manage the users. So as I said, user levels, user groups. You can put people in user groups. You can look at log data, so you can see all of the data that is coming out of the kiosk. So you can do management information reports. So if you want to know particular user group or particular area that you have, what type of data they're doing, what type of extractions they're doing, a particular user. If, for instance, you want to see whether a particular individual user is been complying with doing all the extractions, you can see what type of extractions they're doing, whether they've made any errors. And just basically just managing the managing your exec connected network, really, just sort of keeping an eye on it, making sure it's all working correctly, working connected and not falling offline. If it's fallen offline, then you've got diagnostics, and you can do your diagnostic checks and do as much as you can to feed the data back, maybe to the network team or back to MSAB. Maybe there's an issue, and professional services, we've got some really clever tech guys that will basically just be able to help them diagnose what the fault is. And maybe it's a fault with exec, might be a fault with the network, or and then you can narrow it down. So it's really good at sort of helping you fine tune and find out exactly what is the fault. So
I mean, for a permanently connected network kiosk, that's impressive anyway. But does it handle the laptops and the tablets when they come into a network within range?
You can't do a laptop. So that laptop would probably just go straight to a lab. That would never be touched by anyone on a Frontline. The tablet, tablets basically. I always used to say to the people I train, a tablet's just a big phone, basically. So, just don't treat it any differently. You treat a tablet exactly the same. So phones, tablets, SIM cards, memory cards, that all can be done by the Frontline officer. Obviously, usually they're logical. So so remember, it's really important for the investigator to understand that it has its limitations. So if you just want a particular set of data out and it's suitable for the Frontline officers, then great, pass it to them. But if it requires something more, then really consider sending it straight to the lab. Especially if you've got a particular phone where it might not be best if it's powered off, for instance. You might need to keep it powered on. So but then but that's all about training, good training of all your officers, not just the ones doing extractions. If you've got officers out and about or the law enforcement officers that have got a good awareness of what the capabilities of the Frontline and the lab and what the phone is capable of or whatever, then that helps a lot. So
yeah, and that's part of the training that gets dished out, isn't it? Is that frontline, exactly. Very frontline first responder. This is a phone, this is where it needs to go and what needs to happen to it, kind of stuff. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Maybe another example you can give us then is, I know we discussed before this, but the managed service where you can remotely help administer the exec server with one of your customers.
Yeah. So I've predominantly, a lot of my time is dealt with two sort of key or big customers, if you like. So the one I just said before, the 200 kiosks, and another one that they've got something like 70 kiosks and tablets. And they're not the project that I've been managing is all about getting the transition over from a different provider, using our kiosks and tablets, and getting everything up and running with the workflow, helping out with their getting exec director connected to the network. And it's got to the stage now where they have all their kiosks and tablets out and about in the field. They've done the trainings. They've been trained by MSAB, by our training team. And we, so you have Pacific staff from MSAB who are UK based. So because it's the strict rules from the customer's point of view, then certain UK based members of staff from MSAB that have been vetted and then on the approved list, we can remote in. So it's got a remote desktop that we can remote in. So we've got a static IP, and then we can, if we're requested, so we can't just go straight into their server, but if we get a specific request, then our job is to update their XRY software. So they've got a pre-production environment and a production environment, so 2 exec directors with kiosks and tablets, or kiosks on both. And if they request us to update their exec director, then they'll request us to do it. Official request comes in, we make the request to go in through their IT, and then we get into their server with so I'll have like an individual login, so it's recorded that I've made the request to come in, and I'm now into their server, and then I seek permission to get into their exec director. I get that permission, and then I'm in, and once I'm in there, everything I do is recorded. Obviously, it's recorded by their own software, but you can also, everything is logged in exec director, so all the actions that I do, if I make an update to the software, or if anything I do is logged. And then, yeah, so we'll update their exec director software, and we'll also, if an update comes out, so the recent update to XRY, we'll push it out to their pre-production first. They go away, do all their testing, do all their whatever testing they need to do. If they're happy that the update to exec director is good and the update to XRY is good, then they'll then request us to do the same for the production environment. So again, exactly the same process. We'll go in and then we'll update their environment. So it's really tightly managed. Obviously, everything we do is logged. It's for a specific request. We don't do anything more than update their environment, and also maybe help out with if there's a particular issue. Maybe there's a couple of kiosks have gone down or something, and it's unsure whether it's network or whether it's exec. There's a fault with maybe the kiosks or exec director. So it's a case of then we can help problem solve that. And yeah, I think it's quite unique. It took a lot of work to set up, and it's brilliant that it's now set up and running, and it's when updating and doing that sort of stuff when it's you, and when I was in the police or whatever, but doing it as part of a company, you really want to do a good job. And obviously now, once it's all been set up and all the effort that's gone to it, it's really, really quite rewarding to log out knowing that it's all gone smoothly and they've now got their updates to their kiosks, and they don't have to. That's something that they don't have to worry about themselves. So that the 2 particular sort of managers of those, for their two different police forces. So the 2 different managers of those estates, they can just concentrate on doing other stuff, knowing that they can rely on us to do that side of things. Because if you've got 70 or so kiosks, then that's a bit of effort to manage and to do the updates and stuff. So they can concentrate on doing everything else. And as part of that, we also have a hardware sort of SLA side of things. So where we've got one of our service engineers will go out and fix things. So we're sort of really heavily involved with both of those customers, and it's I think it works really well for both. Brilliant for them because they've got someone from MSAB in their office, and if they know the names, and if there's an issue, then they know that they can just speak to that engineer. And also it's really good for us as well, because we're really closely working with that customer. We know the contacts, and if they have an issue, then it's really easy for them just to get in touch with us, and it's really easy for us to just keep that contact going and keep the customer happy, which is really important.
Yeah. So I guess, like, if I was an external customer listening to this and about that example that you just gave, which sounds really cool, is there a clear segregation between you coming in to administer the exec director and then any type of access to the data that they may be dealing with? Because
So So that's something we make. And then the customer doesn't want us to see the data.
Exactly.
And no, we see no user data. So so as much as you'll see is the a list of user numbers as such. So usually police forces have users through user numbers and stuff. You'll never see the data that is from digital media, from the phone, if you're talking about that. And to be honest, if all you're doing is literally updating the software, you literally go to a couple of pages on Exec Director. You go to there, you update the software, you're in and you're out and you're done. It's recorded. So they wanted to go back and see what the MSAB staff member did. It's really easy for them to do. They just need to go to the logs or use their own monitoring software. But no, we definitely don't want to see the user data.
Yeah.
The customer won't want us to see the user data clearly. So yeah, that's
Okay.
very, very segregated.
Yeah.
And this
Cool.
this environment that this is running in, is this an on-prem hardware, or is this a cloud environment?
So for that particular one, it is they want to get to the stage soon when they are in the cloud, but it's all on, so you've got the kiosks dotted around lots and lots of different sites. They're all connected on their own network to Exec Director, but they're the extractions and everything all go off onto USBs and stuff.
So is there any data in Exec Director at all being uploaded?
You've got you've got sort of not the data from the extraction. So
Okay.
if for that particular one, if you've got an environment where your kiosks and tablets are connected to a network, but the extraction is going to USB or whatever hard drive, then the Exec Director will collect all the user data, the usage data of the kiosk, the tablet, all that sort of stuff. Not, it will tell you how many artifacts in an extraction, for instance. So you'll know that maybe there were so many pictures and videos and whatever, but you don't see the pictures and videos. It's just managing the systems, if you like, the systems and users.
Okay. So going back again to Des's question, in an environment whereby those kiosks are uploading to the cloud,
yes,
are you still segregated from the data?
Oh, you've got to, yeah. So if you're using Exec Director, then you see the user data and everything else. You obviously, if it's going to the cloud, then there'll be a SharePoint where that data is accessible on whatever system you're using to view the data. But Exec Director is, again, it's just managing the users, the systems, and that way. So yeah, you're not seeing the data if you're using Exec Director.
Right. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So that as I built that in my head, it started to make more sense as opposed to where it started off. Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's all right.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us, Alan. It's been a pleasure having you and to talk through the Exec Director and learning about what the kiosks were and all about what's new to come, because it all sounds exciting as well as you guys keep going, and some of those projects sound really cool. So hopefully there's more and more of that for you guys. Yeah, all of our listeners, as always, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you get your podcasts from, but the videos will be available on our website, forensicfocus.com/podcasts, and YouTube, along with a transcript as well. And we'll see you guys next time when I know we've got a few more podcasts and videos lined up, and Si and I need to do another one between us soon. So
Yep.
We'll be back soon with lots and lots for 2024. But thanks everyone, and we'll see you all next time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you.